Thank you, Bob. Good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for coming out this evening, and also thank you very much for the invitation this evening. We'll go ahead and bring the first slide up. Okay, next slide, please. The mission of the C&O Historical Society is, primary vision and mission, is to collect, conserve, restore, index, archive, and make available materials relating to the history of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway to as wide an audience as possible. These materials are used to interpret the American railway experience, utilizing the C&O Railway as an example. That it also would include data, photographs, drawings, publications, small artifacts, and a full-size railway rolling stock that we have. And also one of our missions too is to drive economic development and tourism to the Allegheny Highlands. Next slide, please. So basic information about the C&O Historical Society here. The Society actually began in January of 1969 when the first edition of the C&O Historical Newsletter was published by the founder of the Society and current Chief Historian Thomas Dixon. The Society was incorporated in 1975 and recognized as a 501c3 corporation in 1977. In 1986, the Society acquired the entire corporate records collection from of the C&O by CSX Chairman Hayes Watkins, and that came in, I think, in several truckloads plus 2 boxcars full of records and documents. We purchased the Archives building on East Ridgeway Street in 1986 and opened up the Heritage Center in 2010. Next slide, please. How we are structured. The Society is governed by an 18-member board of directors. Included in that 18 are the 4 officers that are charged with the daily operation of the Society, which are Mark Totten, who's the president, Cliff Clements, who's the vice president, Bill Mickey, who's our secretary, and myself, who is the treasurer and CFO. Society operation, I'm gonna move this out of the way here because this thing is giving me some shadow. Society operations are divided into 7 different functions. That includes archives, retail, publications, member services, the Heritage Center, St. Albans, West Virginia, and conferences and events. Our archives contains over 160,000 photo images, over 300,000 mechanical and engineering drawings, 5,000 books in our library, again, the corporate history files of the 139 C&O predecessor companies, 400 boxes of general reference material, including timetables, press releases, studies, articles, and letters, and a 3,000-piece advertising collection of the railroad from the 1930s to the 1990s. Our retail operation, the Society maintains a wide assortment of C&O and railroad-related items for sale, including books, clothing, models, ornaments, china, glassware, jewelry, and accessories. And these are marketed by our annual catalogs and sold at our Heritage Center gift shop, also through our online portal, chessieshop.com, and also with specialty shows, and also through Constant Contact, Facebook, and eBay. Our publications department is rather busy and it composes a large segment of the Society. The Society publishes a bi-monthly magazine on C&O history, featuring articles on the railroad operations, locomotives, passenger and freight cars, structures, people, location, advertising, and models. The Society also publishes a quarterly history series, which provides a more in-depth study of a particular aspect of the C&O offering, which basically is expanded content from the magazine. Other publications include books on operations, photographs taken by nationally known rail photographers such as William Rittis and Gene Huddleston. We produce a monthly online magazine, and our publications group is also charged with overseeing developing content for all those publications. Member services, that basically is, they're responsible for assisting customers with purchases of merchandise, updating customer information, processing membership renewals, and resolving any member-related issues. The Heritage Center actually opened in 2010 and is the centerpiece for displaying C&O artifacts and memorabilia. This includes the Freight House Museum, which houses significant exhibits on C&O, including an operating oak-scale model railroad, a replica small-town passenger station, which also houses our gift shop, a replica operator's cabin, a miniature railroad, and a collection of historic locomotives, freight, and passenger cars. The Freight House Museum, if you've never had the opportunity to be there, I would certainly encourage you to go. It houses a great deal of memorabilia. There's information in there on the C&O Hospital. There's selections of dining car china from various eras of the railroad. There is a quadricycle in there that actually was used by a doctor who would pedal up the Hot Springs branch to attend patients up there. We also have models up there, George Washington memorabilia, and we also have a series of small locomotives that are there as well. And they actually do operate, we just don't run them on the miniature railroad much anymore. For our historic cars, the car that you're looking at right now is the Combine car. This car actually has historical significance to Clifton Forge in that it ran on the Hot Springs train for many years. The train ceased operation in 1969, and towards the end, it basically consisted of one locomotive, the Combine car, a caboose, and an occasional hopper of coal that we'd taken up to the Homestead for the heating plant up there. Chassis 29 is our Cold War warrior. This car actually was the office car and belonged to Walter Toohey, who was the president of the C&O at the time. If you'll notice, the individual looking out the back is President Dwight Eisenhower. The car was used by President Eisenhower to travel from Washington down to White Sulphur Springs for discussions on constructing the bunker there at the Greenbrier. This is one of our best pieces here, and we're trying to work very hard to get that car fully restored and operational. This is Gadsby's Tavern. Gadsby's Tavern is significant in that it is the last original car from C&O's premier passenger train that was inaugurated in 1932, the George Washington. The car celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2022, and actually was refurbished in the 1980s and actually ran an excursion service for a while. We do have some issues with the roof right now that we're trying to remediate, and also redo the inside of the car. And it will be open if you'd like to go in on Saturday and Sunday at the Heritage Festival. St. Albans, West Virginia. This is our newest addition to the Historical Society. This is our satellite location. It is open once a month, usually the first Saturday of every month, and houses a small O-scale layout, selling C&O merchandise in there, and is a joint venture with the town of St. Albans. And actually they've done very, very well there. There's a good tourist draw for the individuals coming through West Virginia in that particular area. This is our SD40. This locomotive was manufactured by the Electromotive Division of General Motors. It was manufactured in 1971. It was completely restored approximately 10 years ago by CSX Railroad at the Huntington Shops, and it was donated to the Historical Society. So down at the Heritage Center, this is the locomotive that is sitting right next to the passenger station building. This is 614. This is a 484 Greenbrier locomotive, and in terms of the designation of 484, that would indicate that there are four pilot wheels, 8 driving wheels, and four trailing trucks. This locomotive was built in 1948, in June of 1948, by the Lima Locomotive Works, and was designed to haul the passenger trains from Washington to Hinton, and was able to have sustained speeds of over 60 miles an hour going over the mountains. It actually was retired from service when the diesels came on in the 1950s. Actually went to the Huntington Shops and lay dormant there for a while, wound up going to the Kentucky Steam Museum for a period of time, and then wound up in excursion service in the 1980s and 1990s. The locomotive has been here as a resident of the Heritage Center since, I believe it was 2011. This is Little C&O. This is our miniature railroad there. We have 2 locomotives that pull the train. And if you will notice, you can see that the individuals riding the train are the folks from the Allegheny Humane Society and their dogs. So this was a fundraising effort that we did with the Humane Society. And when things slowed down a little bit, we put the volunteers and the dogs on the little train, so everybody had a good time with that. Our freight car collection consists of 4 cabooses, 3 boxcars, 1 flat car, and 1 maintenance of way car. We are in the process now of trying to go through and deciding which pieces we want to restore and which pieces we decide to let go. Sadly, anything involving a railroad restoration requires a lot of time and a lot of money. And so we're in the process now of prioritizing which cars we actually want to retain and restore. This is our passenger station and JD cabin. The passenger station is a replica of a small town passenger station consistent with the C&O prototype there. And the JD cabin actually is a replica of the original JD cabin, which was up here in Clifton Forge, where the Mountain Subdivision and the James River Subdivision converged. At one time, before the installation of centralized traffic control on the railroad, train movements were governed by a cabin, and you would have an operator in there that would hand down orders to the locomotive engineer and the train crew to allow them to continue on their way. Conferences and events. The Society does run an annual conference for its members, and we also run a series of events at the Heritage Center. Again, this is the Allegheny Humane Society there with dogs that they brought down for a particular event that we held. This is the event that we did for the Christmas Mother. We've done 2 events in December as a fundraiser for the Christmas Mother. We will be doing our 3rd on December 7th of this year, so we hope that you'll be able to come by and certainly contribute. Little C&O is available for everyone to ride. We also have Santa Claus and refreshments down there, and the staff of the Clifton Forge office here actually dress up in Grinch characters, so it's worth to come out and see them in those costumes. Next slide. This is the Easter egg hunt that we did this past year in cooperation with the Clifton Forge Police. There were kids and plastic eggs all over the Heritage Center for about 2 hours there, but everybody had a great time. A little bit about the Clifton Forge staff. There are 7 employees that the Society maintains. Our customer service coordinator is Anita Bird. Publications production designer is Michael Dixon, and he's the one that lays out all the magazines and books. Our merchandising coordinator is Brandy Dudley. Shipping coordinator is Wendy Montgomery. Ellen Wills is our financial administrator, and she is here with us this evening. Thank you all for coming out. Our facilities management at Heritage Center is Leo Wright, also known as Mr. Ambassador, and our grounds assistant is Garrett Montgomery. Society finances. Like most nonprofits, funding for the Society operation comes from member dues, net income from merchandise sales, Heritage Center admissions and rentals, donations from members, designated fundraisers, grants, and bequests from estates. There are 2 partner groups that we do business with. The first is under the auspices of the Virginia Rail Heritage Region. Back in 2010, the House of Delegates designated the areas of Lynchburg, Roanoke, and Clifton Forge as Virginia's Rail Heritage Region. When the designation was kicked off, it actually started with a great fanfare, but kind of dissipated fairly quickly. So one of the things that we're doing is to kind of get that revived a little bit. Next slide, please. And that basically is in conjunction with the Owens Link Museum in Roanoke, the Virginia Museum of Transportation in Roanoke, and the Allegheny Historical Society over in Covington. The goal is to have a circuit running the 220 corridor where you can either go east or west, where you can start in one particular area, like start at Covington, see the exhibits there at the C&O Depot and the Discovery Center, come to Clifton Forge for the Heritage Center, head over to Roanoke for the Owens Link Museum and the Virginia Museum of Transportation. And if you're coming west, then you would certainly reverse that. Next slide, please. Our volunteer opportunities. We're always in need of volunteers who have skills in carpentry, metalcraft, electric, and who can assist with Heritage Center projects. We're also in need of volunteers who can serve as docents at the Freight House and on the equipment collection, and also at the archives building to catalog artifacts and assist with scanning. Future plans and initiatives. We are looking forward to installing track 5 there at the Heritage Center, which will basically kind of bisect the property there at the Heritage Center. Currently, we have 2 tracks, and the exhibits that we have are kind of both sandwiched on those 2 tracks. So the goal in installing track 5 will be to spread those exhibits out a little bit. We also want to be able to develop additional exhibits to further drive traffic to the Heritage Center, broaden our outreach to individuals outside the railfan community, utilize technology to enhance the visitor experience, and also we're looking at installing a rail cam at Clifton Forge on the virtual railfan network, and also to continue to work on restoring our collection of historic cars. Upcoming events. We have the Heritage Festival coming up this Saturday and Sunday, June 22nd and 23rd. We hope that you all come out for that. Fireworks at the Heritage Center on July 3rd. The first annual Chessie Car Show will be held on July 13th, and that is in conjunction with the Allegheny Cruisers. We'll be doing a photo exhibit of Gene Huddleston in the 3rd quarter, a photo exhibit of William Rittis in the 3rd quarter, celebrating Chessie's birthday in September of 2024. We'll also be doing our volunteer appreciation presentation in September. Our Halloween event is scheduled for October, and we'll also be looking to do an event on the men and women of the C&O in the fourth quarter. And again, our Christmas Mother fundraiser will be on December 7th, and then in 2025, the George Washington Train Show is scheduled to run here in Clifton Forge. This is the Heritage Center mural. I'm not sure if anyone has had the chance to look at it at the Heritage Center. There was a retaining wall on the east side of the Heritage Center, and we decided we'd like to go ahead and have a mural painted on there. The wall is 200 feet long, and it was painted by local artist William Jennings. So there are 3 locomotives that you can see on the mural. There's the Allegheny locomotive pulling a coal train, there is the steam turbine locomotive pulling a train, and there is a steam locomotive pulling a passenger train. This is a great project, and William did a great job, and we got great publicity, and it's one of the things that helps drive tourism outside of the railfan community, because artists love to come and take a look at the mural. I want to share a couple of stories with you here about Clifton Forge, and the first one is about the Clifton Forge alligator. Anybody heard the story? No. Yeah. A couple of you have. Okay, great. Well, for those of you who have not, apparently back in the early 1900s, there was a wealthy family that lived here in Clifton Forge that had gone to Florida, and they had brought back a live alligator with them for their kids. Well, as you would expect, the alligator got a little bit large, and the family decided they didn't want to keep it, so they decided to leave it up here at the passenger station. The alligator continued to flourish up there. There was water up there in a creek that it would swim in, and actually occupied part of the baggage room when the weather got cold. Unfortunately, the alligator wound up getting killed when a train hit it. Well, that just goes to show you, make sure you look both ways before you cross. And so sadly, the poor alligator passed away. So there was some discussion about, is this a legitimate story or is it not? And the fact is that the railroad has actually notified and has documentation that there was in fact an alligator up here at the passenger station in Clifton Forge. We have a drawing that was prepared by the track engineering group for Clifton Forge up here, and when he did the original drawing, there actually is a little alligator that he wrote in there on that document. So anytime you want to come and see the alligator track site, we're glad to show it to you. This is Charles White. Some of you may know who Mr. White is. Mr. White was the individual that headed up the Buckingham Lining Bar gang. Charles was born in Huntington, West Virginia, and his dad and his grandfather are both employees of the C&O. He eventually moved to Clifton Forge and worked at the YMCA for a period of time, and eventually wound up relocating to Buckingham County, where he was an educator, a builder, and a historian. And one of the historic groups that he was meeting with at the time, actually they were talking about railroad history and trying to find out if there was anyone local in Buckingham County that they could use to sit there and tell stories about the railroad. And Charles spoke up and said, well, I've got several guys that go to my church that actually did track work on the railroad. Let me see what I can do. So he put together the Buckingham Lining Bar gang. And the gang would go around to various events, fairs, venues, stockholder meetings, and they would actually show how tracks were aligned using lining bars back in the days before mechanization hit the railroad. They do have videos on YouTube. If you ever get the chance to take a look at them, I would encourage you to do so. And there is also some information about the gang on the Scottsville Museum website. One of the interesting things about Mr. White was, as I mentioned, he was born in Huntington, West Virginia, and moved to Clifton Forge. The individual who was the doctor that brought Mr. White into the world was C.C. Barnett. And Dr. Barnett lived in Huntington, West Virginia, and saw the need for a hospital that would support the black residents of Huntington. So he opened up what was referred to as the Barnett Hospital. And one of the things about the Barnett Hospital was that it was actually became part of the C&O hospital system. And C&O had hospitals in Huntington and in Clifton Forge. So I think that's a little bit of interesting history about Mr. White here and his ties to the area here. Next slide. This is a vintage ad called A Total Summer Eclipse. You'll notice the ad features Chessie, the railroad kitten. For those of you who are not familiar with Chessie, back in 1933, there was a gentleman by the name of Lionel Probert, who was the Vice President of Public Relations and Advertising for the C&O. He was looking for a new way to market C&O's premier passenger trains. He happened to be in New York one day, and actually walking down the street, he happened to see an image of the little kitten, half asleep, with the paw sticking out of the pillow. He bought the etching for $5, brought it back to his public relations and advertising department and said, see what you can do with the cat. So they eventually came up with the marketing tagline, "Sleep like a kitten" on Chesapeake and Ohio. So actually the cat became the advertising symbol for many, many years. This is from the 1930s. Next slide, please. This one is All Through the Night, again from the 1930s, and again you see Chessie up there with the tagline, "Sleep like a kitten." Next slide, please. This ad is called "Lower 9 Goes to War." This graced the 1943 C&O calendar, and it's probably one of the most in-demand calendars of anybody in terms of purchasing C&O memorabilia. Back during World War II, civilians were discouraged from traveling on the trains in order to give the military space for the war needs. So you can sit there and see that Chessie has given up her berth to the soldiers there. So she is now snoozing in her regular position on the floor underneath. But again, this is a great piece here. And again, it was the most popular calendar that C&O ever put out, 1943. Next slide. We'll take a look at a couple of vintage images here. This is a conductor on the C&O train. This photograph actually was taken here in Clifton Forge by William Rittis, who was the C&O's equivalent to O. Winston Link. Next slide, please. This is another William Rittis photograph here. This was taken early. This is the shops up here in Clifton Forge at the Roundhouse. Next slide. This is C&O's experimental steam turbine locomotive. In 1948, after the war, the railroads were all looking to modernize their passenger service. C&O was at the forefront of this based on the focus of their chairman, Robert R. Young. What Mr. Young decided to do was to come up with a luxury passenger train running from Washington to Cincinnati. And the train was to be like nothing else anybody had ever ridden on. They had movies on there. They had Disney theaters for the kids. They actually had a goldfish bowl in there. Unfortunately, because of the motion of the train, the fish didn't survive or live too long. They eventually turned it into a planter, but it was a good thought. To power the train, the C&O contracted with Westinghouse locomotives and to create the steam turbine. This locomotive produced over 5,000 horsepower, was 160 feet long, was a huge behemoth. Sadly, the thing did not sit there technically and do very well, because at that point in time, the railroads were converting to diesel locomotives. C&O tried to hold out with the steam locomotive because they were a coal carrier, and they felt that the coal operators would not necessarily look favorably on switching from coal to diesel fuel. But the locomotive did run in service for approximately a year. Sadly, all three locomotives were scrapped, and that was the end of the program. And actually, the Chessie train never actually got off the track either. Many of the cars were sold off to other railroads or to other countries that could use them. Next slide. This is another vintage image. These are track works. This was taken up at Lee Hall, but you can see the track workers up here and how difficult that work was. It was extremely heavy, a lot of manual labor there, and you had to have strong arms and a strong back to be a track worker there. Next slide. Questions?